Well, hello, everybody. It is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. On today's program, I'm talking to college admissions expert John Hupalo about the disastrous process of getting financial aid for your child for college. John brings us some updates and tips on what to do. If you have any questions about anything from the program or you want to talk about becoming a client and working directly with me on your finances and investments and your future retirement, just send an email at info@prudentmoney.com. Listen, I hope that you enjoy today's episode.
Dacus of the Dacus Report, heard weekly on Bible School Radio 91.3 KDKR Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, how has the reporting of financial aid eligibility going? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. And you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, John Hupalo is with us today. And before we talk about the problems in the student financial aid process, getting a good update on that, and some tips on what to do, how about a little bit of good news, John? I came across this today, and to me this is very encouraging. A number of U.S. public high school students guaranteed to take a personal finance course on track to double to 53% by 2030. The number of states guaranteeing a personal finance course to high school students grew from 17 to 25% in the last year. That's the kind of things you like to see.
Yeah, no question, Bob. It's springtime, and I'm glad that spring is bringing us to a place where we can talk about great things instead of all the FAFSA fiasco and all the nonsense that we've had to deal with and are still dealing with. But I'm glad you're starting here because I'm with you. I'm 100% heartened by the fact that there's a recognition that if we want students to be consumers of education, because you and I have talked about this, Bob, one of the issues that we think is a big deal is that a lot of parents and a lot of students don't purchase a college education the way they would purchase any other good, any consumer good, like a car or whatever it might be. And I was thinking about this, that the reality is we're asking students up until now to go out and be consumers of education, but we're not giving them the tools they need to understand what that means. So these states that are on top of this are doing a great service. And when you dig into it, it's really only all but 3 states in the District of Columbia are doing something to help students get some better financial literacy along the line. And in states like Texas, for instance, there's a requirement that there is some kind of financial literacy baked into other subjects, other courses. 25 states have gone above and beyond that standard and said, you know what, we don't want to integrate it just in a course. We're going to have a separate course, and we're going to require this course to for students in order for them to graduate. So the trend is really terrific. I think it's going to help a lot of parents educate their students. And what I mean by that is the students are going to come home and they're going to start talking to their parents about this, and it's going to give them an opportunity then to say, you know, this applies to what we're doing on the college preparedness side as well. So I'm really excited that these programs are taking hold.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it is really good news to hear, and that of course, financial literacy has been the problem. And you know what's interesting, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well in talking to people, is that kids are excited about getting education in finances and how money works. They're interested in getting it, and in students I've talked to in the past, you can definitely tell that there is an interest and a desire to learn how to do it, and that's just good stuff. So let's talk about something that I don't know is good stuff, but would love your opinion on it. And it's really interesting. I just happen to come across this article. I hadn't heard about this at all. But the title of the article is Biden's Education Secretary vows to shut down the largest Christian university in the U.S. This is Grand Canyon University. I don't even know that I've heard of it before, but it's the largest Christian university, and it looks like the government's coming after them. Now, there's two sides to every story. I get that. They're being accused of doing a lot of things that are fraudulent. I get that. But, man, that is pretty aggressive for the government to be going after the largest Christian university in the U.S. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, vowing to shut them down.
Yeah, Bob, it's really, truly unbelievable, the extremes that the politicians are going to right now. And so I was with you. The only reason I knew, frankly, that Grand Canyon University existed is their basketball team got in the NCAA tournament this year and almost beat Alabama.
That is right. Now you're triggering my memory. Okay, that's what it was. Okay, yeah.
So I went back and I said, it turns out they've been in the tournament before, but it's kind of shocking. Like, where is this, and what is this university about? This is not. So let me frame it this way: the Biden administration and others have been on a course to shut down for-profit universities. They don't really see that for-profit universities can provide good education to students generally. Even though some of them are wonderful, there have been a lot of them, like the truck driving schools and some others, that took advantage of students. And so I think that if you want to go like the genesis of this, since we're going to a Christian university, the genesis of this is this idea that for-profit schools are bad. Okay, so that's what they think. And layer on top of this a Christian university. This is not a fly-by-night truck driving school. This university was founded in 1949. They have 65,000 undergraduates. They're in Phoenix, and their acceptance rate is over 80%. So this is a place. And by the way, also, it's not off the charts expensive. Right, so you look at this and say, well, what is this? So I dug a little bit deeper because I couldn't believe the story when I read it as well. And it turns out the specific program that they've identified as being abusive, and I don't know if it is or it isn't, but I'll say this: it's a program for doctoral students that about 7,500 doctoral students, so again, a little more than maybe 10% or so of the entire university, and it's about their disclosure of some of the fees and other around this doctoral program. And the Department of Education fined Grand Canyon University $37.7 million for this very recently. And just to give you some context about like how big and disproportionate this fine is, they fined Michigan State University and Penn State for those terrible things that happened on those campuses, or sexual abuse of those women, less than $6 million.
Mm.
And so and so that's the sort of the facts around the whole thing. And you asked my opinion. And my opinion goes, the day after the president of Colombia was summoned to Capitol Hill for a special hearing about whether or not the university is anti-Semitic. This is after the Harvard and University of Pennsylvania presidents were summoned up in December, and then they lost their jobs. And there just seems to be this furor, this fervor around trying to get on a bandwagon and kind of whipping special interests. And so I think the underlying attack here is probably less against a Christian university and more against a for-profit. But again, it like checks all the boxes to get everybody riled up. And it's just, I keep going back. I've used the word shameful too many times in the last year in describing the way the Department of Education has acted with regard to its customers, the customers being the families and the students who are involved in this FAFSA fiasco. And now these universities, again, I don't know, where you want to fall out on what you think about the boxes they're all in, but at the end of the day, we want to try to educate students. And I just don't know what message we're sending with all these, rampant attacks on all kinds of different schools across the country.
Well, I'll tell you, I happened to just trip over this story. It wasn't like it was on the front page of any website. And once again, I mean, the optics are horrible on this, and that just by itself, they don't care. They don't care one way or the other.
And what they should care about is, are the students getting a good education for the price? And from what little digging I did, I hadn't heard about this either, Bob, until you brought it up. And I went back and I thought, well, wait a minute, that's 65,000 students there. They were founded in 1949. They must be doing something right.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And they have something on the order of like 26 different regulators and accrediting organizations that are reviewing their practices day over day. And so, okay, they maybe they did find some place where there was some disclosure wasn't right. I don't know. I don't have an opinion about that. But again, it seems like they pulled out a howitzer when they might have been trying to kill a mosquito here. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's absurd to shut down a university like that. Anyway, but that's politics. That's the government, and did want to share that with our listeners because I think that needs to be on people's radar. The other thing that needs to be on the radar, and man, I mean, I couldn't believe that when I was kind of taking inventory of our conversations, how much trouble this FAFSA form was still causing. And I'd gotten an email. Well, actually, Sherry got an email that go fill out your FAFSA for this University of Arkansas. And this was like maybe a week ago. Yeah, about a week ago. And I will say this, and then I want to hear everything that you've, because I know you're on the front lines of this. I did go and I did the FAFSA form for both my boys. And it was really a very nicely streamlined approach. It was pretty easy. There was it was a little bit glitchy, if you will, with some of the entering in your email address where it says you got to enter in the correct form, and you go, well, I did, and then you have to erase it, and you have to put it back. But other than that, I thought it was a real good process.
So this is I said shameful before. I'm going to say this is the shame of it again. And that is that the end result of what they were trying to do with the FAFSA Simplification Act is tremendously good. It's the experience that you had. They want you to be able to go on there, have your income tax information, fill that form for you, basically, and make it streamlined. And the end of that result, they also want to try to make sure that kids who need more financial aid to get to school will actually get that aid. Like, who could possibly be against that? So the end goal is really good. The problem they've had is that the rollout was fantastically terrible. It couldn't have gone any worse, right? Literally, from they said to us over the summer last year and early in September, the form is supposed to be available on October 1. We're not going to have it ready in time. We need more time to get all these integrations worked out. So we'll have it available sometime in December, right? And then the whole snowball started. Well, sometime in December became the end of December, and then they said, well, we're going to have a soft launch because there's still some issues. They put the form up literally like on New Year's Eve or the day before, and by January 3rd, they had to stop it because the systems were crashing, and they discovered something like 23 or 25 very significant software bugs, which means people couldn't use the system, right? And they've corrected them over time. And now remember, we're in April. It's still not fixed 100%. You had a great experience recently, I think in part because I'm going to say you were in the fairway, right? You've done it before. Your information was there. You probably most likely had your FSA IDs for yourself
Yes.
and for the boys. And so you didn't have to like jump through all the hoops that the first-time users had to jump through, and those systems were crashing. So I'm glad you had a great experience. I'm very hopeful that next year's class will be the beneficiaries of the guinea pigs that had to go through this year. It's absolutely terrible. But the Department of Education literally, and we have a software company, Invite Education makes calculators and search engines. And every time we put out a new tool, I hold my breath for 3 days, hoping that all of our testing worked so that people, our customers, are not the ones to find it. The Department of Education did the exact opposite. They had 2.5 or 3 years to do this. They came out, they had to have known in the summer last year that they had big problems, right? And instead of saying, we've got problems, we're going to do whatever the corrective action is, they said a prayer and they put the form out there and it didn't work. And so they literally were telling their customers, you're going to be our test group. And you just don't do that. So yes, there's a lot of problems, but I hope the end of the day, the experience you had is the one that next year's class will have. They'll be able to get their FSA IDs in time. They can work out all the other kinks and problems. There's a whole website, by the way, at the Department of Education that chronicles every one of the open issues and where they are in trying to fix it. And there's not one or two, Bob. There's like, I don't know, I didn't count, but there's more than 10 still open issues that they're trying to fix.
Well, and let me be very clear. The difference in the two is not life-changing by any stretch.
Right.
I mean, it's a little bit nicer to look at.
Yeah.
And maybe it goes a little bit faster, but and they tell you it's going to take an hour to fill out. It takes 15 minutes, 20 max. And I will say this for parents that are going through that process, whether you've been through it once or twice or first time, gather all your information, Social Security numbers and that type of thing ahead of time, because it will make it go smoother, because they're going to obviously ask for all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And on mycollegecorner.com, we wrote some articles about what to expect in that whole area. So I would, if folks have not started this yet, I would look for some of that kind of information, because the advice you just gave is really just the best you can have. It will make it go an awful lot faster if you can do that. We put one up on December 7th and another November 17th. I'm looking at it right now, but 10 FAQs to clear up FAFSA confusion, critical financial aid terms you need to know, those sorts of things. So I would go there. And also, actually, the Department of Education's website, if you Google 2425 FAFSA form, they'll tell you exactly what it is you need to complete that form. So I think your piece of advice is spectacular, and hopefully families will follow that.
So that's the FAFSA. That's for financial aid. Now let's talk about the situation where that's not enough, and we got to borrow additional money to get everything taken care of. And that's where the Parents Plus loan comes in. So you're not a big fan of this. You've said it many, many times. And talk a little bit about where this kind of works into the process and what it is that you don't like about it.
Yeah, and so, Bob, I like the way you frame this. So what happens is you file your FAFSA form, and then the college gets the number and says, okay, this is how much aid, this is the relative eligibility. And so from that form then, they say, okay, this student is eligible for this amount of federal grants and state grants, and then also the school will say, well, maybe we'll give some merit aid, or we have some other scholarships. So on a financial aid award letter, you're going to see words like grants and scholarships, which are great because they don't need to be repaid. Then you're going to see something that says this student may or may not be eligible for a federal work study, which is just a job. Doesn't reduce
right.
the bill, but it's just a job, and it's not even a guarantee of a job. But then it says loans, and it says, okay, undergraduate students, freshmen are eligible for $5,500 in federal loans. Okay, great. And then after that, it says, okay, based on this whole package you've just seen, the family still has unmet need, usually, of some amount of money. And then that's the question you're saying, okay, so where does this come from? One of the places it can come from is this program. It's a federal program called the PLUS program, which is an acronym for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Student. And so the idea was this will be the gap filler that will make college accessible for all students. And here's the problem I have with it. One is that the federal government says to be eligible for this loan, we have a very minimal credit criteria. You just have to have no adverse credit, which means that you don't have very long delinquent outstanding debts. It doesn't test to see if you can actually repay that loan. You may have no income. You may have no assets. As long as you don't have adverse credit, they'll give you the loan. They'll also give you the loan up to the full cost of attendance. So if you didn't get any financial aid, they'll say, okay, you will be eligible for this particular loan. And then you look at the terms of the loan, and the interest rate is set every year on July 1st for the next year's worth of borrowers. For those parents who took a PLUS loan starting July 1, 2023, and a run through June 30th of this year, that loan rate is 8.05% for all the borrowers. Doesn't matter what your credit profile is. Everybody gets the same rate. And unlike any of the other opportunities to borrow, for instance, with private credit student loans or parent loans, in the PLUS loan program, there's origination fees. And the origination fee is a little less than 4.25%. So if you borrow, they're going to tack on this 4.25% loan. So I think it's a high interest rate loan. It has an origination fee. They'll let parents borrow up to the cost of attendance without asking or checking to see if they can actually repay the loan. So that's why I think that I've said very strong things about it in the past. We use words like usurious and say things like, if the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau saw that a private lender was making this loan, they would probably close them down, which I think is true. But it's meant to be an access program. And so I want to go to the other side of the coin and say, what might be a better program? So there are 2 points of that. One, a family might want to really think hard and say, you know what, if after the student's financial aid package is put on the table, if we need to borrow a lot more, and you can say how much you think a lot is. In your family, maybe it's $1,000, maybe it's $10,000, whatever it is. We have to borrow much more to make this work. Is this really an affordable school for my son or daughter? That's a hard question, right? Because it's an emotional one, but that's a question to ask. And then the second one is, if there is more borrowing to be had, where else can we get some of that money? And so if you Google private credit student loans or something like that, you'll see that there's a whole array of lenders, maybe a dozen of them or so, who will offer parents loans for college for their kids. And there won't be any origination fees associated with those. And this is where the big brother thing comes in. If they do their credit analysis and they don't think that you're likely to be able to repay that loan based on your income, they're going to say to you, no, we don't think that you should be eligible for this loan. And then if they think that, well, maybe there's a way to do that, but you're a risk, you're going to pay a higher interest rate than someone who might have significantly more means, they have big income coming in, and they will pay a lower rate. And that's this risk-based pricing, just like for a mortgage or a car loan. You go down there, not everybody gets the same rate depending on how the bank thinks that you're going to be able to repay that debt. If they think you're not going to be able to repay it, they charge you more money. It's just the way it works. So I'm glad you brought this up. I think it's a really significant question that has a couple of different answers. But in a lot of ways, I think the PLUS loan program is just really terrible, quite honestly.
Okay, I've got about a minute left, but I have to ask this question because every time you turn the TV on, Biden is forgiving somebody of student loan debt, and he's doing it at 100,000 at a time. I just don't get it. I've started to come to the conclusion that these are people that, according to the way the laws are set up today, would have their loans forgiven anyway. He's just announcing them as they get to the graduation of the program or something. I just don't get it, and I further don't get the fact that he's not using it in any of his political speeches at all.
Yeah, well, he actually was on the campaign trail last week and started to bring this up. But I laughed because you and I usually talk the first Wednesday of the month. We couldn't do it this month. But don't you know, sure enough, on April 12th, he announced another $7.4 billion debt cancellation. And I said, oh, this is great, because every time we come up, I check my notes going back to the other shows. Every single month, there's $5 billion here, $7 billion there. So now he's up to $153 billion for 4.5 million borrowers, and we're going to start seeing more of it on the campaign trail, Bob, no question. And I think some of that has to do with they're trying to distract people away from the FAFSA fiasco and try to focus on something they think is a good thing.
Well, enough to make your head hurt a little bit. But, John, always great to have you on the program. MyCollegeCorner.com is the site, and we'll talk to you next month.
Appreciate it, Bob. Bless you.
God bless you. If you have a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.